What's up guys, Vress here, and I want to share with you some of my experiences and some of the things I've learned coming back to Elder Scrolls Online. As I've finally decided to get seriously into ESO, I thought it would be worthwhile sharing my learnings whilst they're still fresh in my mind. I'm sure there are many of you out there that are going through this journey at the same time as me, so hopefully this will be valuable to you. This first video basically provides the answers to 20 questions that I had in my first couple of days. Things that aren't necessarily that obvious and can be quite frustrating when you don't know them. Or in some cases, things that you might just miss entirely and suffer for later on. If you're on this journey with me and you're excited to learn more about ESO, then I hope you'll consider subscribing to the channel, as we're going to be doing a lot of videos like this over the coming weeks and months. As you probably already know, ESO has an optional subscription model called ESO Plus. Now there's absolutely no reason that you have to get ESO Plus. In fact, I'd definitely recommend trying the game for a while before you go and invest in a subscription. However, if you decide that Elder Scrolls Online is a game that you'd like to seriously play for a longer period of time, then it's probably worth picking it up. The biggest benefit overall is you get access to the DLC, and there's quite a lot of DLC available in-game, so you're going to get all of this story and content as part of your subscription. You also get access to the craft bag, which is actually insanely useful in this game. It's basically a bottomless bag for your crafting materials. Then you have a number of other benefits that just make things a little more convenient in game. I'm not going to go into detail for them, but you can go and read up on them on the ESO website. Though I will mention that these 10% bonuses can be very useful. Traits in particular can take a very long time to research. They take hours to research different traits, so having a 10% bonus to trait research speed can really add up over the weeks or months of playing. Like I said, you don't have to get the ESO Plus membership to enjoy the game. I just wanted to let you know A, that it's there, and B, what the benefits of it are. So when it comes to creating your character, there are a couple of things that are worth knowing straight away. I'm not going to create a detailed class and race guide here. I'm actually probably going to do that in a couple of days in a different video. However, there are a couple of things worth knowing that aren't immediately obvious. First of all, you'll probably notice that races are locked to alliances. So if you want to be a Breton, an Orc, or a Redguard, then you're going to have to be part of the Daggerfall Covenant. Say I then wanted to be a Dark Elf, then I'd have to be part of the Ebonheart Pact. What isn't immediately obvious here is the fact that it doesn't actually have to be this way, and you can actually unlock all races for all alliances. If you want to unlock all alliance race combos, then you need to go over to the Crown Store. You can do this in-game by hitting comma. You can also do it on the website if you'd rather do it that way. In the Crown Store, you need to go to Upgrades, and then you need to go to Account. Here you'll be able to find the Adventurer Pack, and one of the benefits of the Adventurer Pack is that you get the Any Race, Any Alliance upgrade. Another thing you've probably noticed is that there's an additional race choice down here that in my case is greyed out, and this is the Imperial race. Imperials by default are playable as any alliance, but they're not unlocked by default. To be able to play as the Imperial race, then you need to go to Upgrades, Account, and then you need to get the Digital Imperial Edition upgrade. There are a number of benefits that you get with this package, but most importantly, you get access to the Imperial race here. When it comes to classes, there's just one thing I want to mention right now, and that is that this class here, the Warden, may not be unlocked for you. The reason for this is that you don't have the Morrowind expansion, and the Warden actually came with that expansion. If you really want to play as the Warden class, then there's a couple of ways you can do this. Number one, and the most obvious way, is to get the Morrowind expansion. There are a number of different ways to buy the Morrowind expansion, and they're constantly changing as new expansions and packages come out, so I won't list them here. However, just take a look around the website and the Crown Store and you'll see what's currently available. I would definitely consider this to be the best way to get hold of the Warden class, because you're going to get all of the Morrowind expansion and story with it. However, if you have no interest in Morrowind and you just want to unlock the Warden class, then you can do this by going to the Crown Store, hitting Upgrades, hitting Class, and unlocking the Warden class here for 1500 crowns. One thing that was a little confusing to me coming back to the game after having played it a few years ago was that the starting area was totally different. The reason for this is that each new expansion comes with a new starting area, and by default you'll be put into the starting area of the most recent expansion you own. You can see right here that I'm in the starting area for the Summerset expansion, which many of you will probably find yourself doing if you've purchased Summerset. If you're anything like me, then you're probably going to want to experience the storylines in their original order, and there are a couple of things you need to do if you want to experience them that way. First of all, you are going to have to complete the brief tutorial that you're dropped into, regardless of which expansion you have. As soon as you finish that tutorial, it's going to put you into the open world, and at this point you can basically just stop the track you're on. So right now you can see that I'm at the very start of the Summerset storyline. Now if you don't want to do that and you want to do the base game storyline first, then there's a couple of actions you're going to need to take. The first step involves going to the map and teleporting away from where you currently are. The problem with this is that it costs gold and you're not going to have any if you just started the game. So what you'll need to do is actually go through this door. You need to find your way down to a way shrine, which you can see marked on the map here. And the reason that we're walking over to this way shrine is that once you get here, you can actually travel for free to another way shrine without having to pay the fee in gold. I'm part of the Daggerfall Covenant, so what I need to do is get myself to Glenumbra on the mainland. Once you arrive in your faction's starting city, you should immediately see this hooded figure. If you speak to the hooded figure, she'll tell you about her benefactor. You need to go and find that benefactor. You can check the map to find out where the benefactor is. In my case, he's just in the inn down here. Once you get here, you need to speak to the benefactor, but it turns out that things aren't as they seem. At that point, you'll be captured and taken to Cold Harbor, and I don't want to give you any spoilers, so I'm going to stop it here, but essentially that's the starting area for the base game. If you've purchased the Morrowind expansion, then when you log in, you should notice that you have an unread message that has an invitation to Morrowind. Basically, this gives you some instructions, and you need to meet this person outside the town of Seyda-Neen. Now to save you a little bit of searching, if you want to find that town, all you have to do is hit M, right click to zoom out and go to this island over here, which is Vardenfell. In Vardenfell, you'll see it down here in the bottom left, there's a way shrine. As soon as you arrive in Vardenfell, you need to head in this direction. On the map, it's just this sort of junction in the road here. If you walk down here, you'll see a quest, and this is going to get you started on the Morrowind storyline. One of the biggest things that I didn't like about the Elder Scrolls when it first came out was the movement. Everything felt really floaty. It felt like your feet were never really connecting with the ground. It always felt like you were hovering just above the ground. The good news is this can easily be fixed now. If you hit escape, go to settings, hit gameplay, and then look at this first option off here, foot inverse kinematics. I have no idea what that means, by the way, but basically it enables your feet to rest more naturally on the terrain. I've basically gone from being sunken into the ground here to actually being in line with the gradient of the floor. Now that makes a massive difference to how the movement feels in the game. If you're coming from another MMO, then you're likely going to want to do this. When it comes to combat, ESO can be a little bit confusing at first, so I just want to share some very basic things that you need to know. This is in no way some kind of advanced guide. Obviously, I'm still learning this stuff myself, but I want to share with you what I'm learning. That's the point of this video. So basically, you have light and heavy attacks. You can do light attacks by just tapping your left mouse button. Now, light attacks have a couple of purposes. Firstly, they do damage. A small amount of damage, but still nonetheless they are doing damage. Secondly, they charge up your special ability, so you can see from doing all these light attacks that my R ability at the bottom of the screen is fully charged and ready to use. The other kind of basic attack you have is a heavy attack. To do a heavy attack, you just need to hold down the left mouse button. Heavy attacks have a longer charge time and they do a little bit more damage. However, one of the main reasons for using heavy attacks is to build up stamina. So you'll notice from sprinting around that my stamina bar on the bottom right hand side is going down. Now, if I want to recharge some of that stamina, I can use a heavy attack to do so. I know this is really simple stuff and experienced players might laugh at this kind of thing being in a guide, but this is for absolute beginners and this is the kind of thing that will catch you out early on. Next up, let's talk about blocks and interrupts. You can block by holding down your right mouse button, and you can interrupt by hitting your left and right mouse buttons at the same time. You can also interrupt by holding down your right mouse button and then tapping your left mouse button. There'll be times in a fight when an enemy starts to glow yellow, and that means they're charging a heavy attack. I was able to block this wolf's heavy attack by holding down my right mouse button. Once you block a heavy attack, the enemy is actually dazed afterwards, and you're able to exploit it with a heavy attack of your own. When you do block, you'll notice that stamina is used, but only if the block is successful. This is the absolute basics of blocking, and there are more advanced ways to use blocks, but this is the basic one that you need to know to get started. The second mechanic we talked about was interrupts, and that's where an enemy starts to cast an ability and you hit left and right mouse buttons at the same time to interrupt that ability. Not all abilities will be interruptible, but here's an example of one that is. I was able to interrupt and stun this Spriggan whilst he was trying to channel a spell onto this bear that he summoned. Once again, that is the absolute basics of the interrupt mechanic, but it's something that I wanted to show you because it's one of the things that can catch you out early on, and it's one of the things that can make the game seem a little intimidating and make the combat feel a little clunky, when in reality, it really isn't. The final combat mechanic that I want to cover is the dodge ability. So by default you'll have double tap dodge enabled, which means if you double tap the W, A, S or D key, then you'll dodge like so. Each time you dodge, you notice that you'll use stamina. Double tap dodge is not something I'd recommend using in any game, and this is why. Imagine you're walking forward like so, and you need to then dodge forward. Well, to do it, you have to take your finger off the W key, which means you're going to stop. It doesn't matter how fast you are, you're going to stop and you're going to lose momentum. So what ends up happening is you're walking forward, you stop very briefly to then dodge. That's not ideal because, like I said, you end up losing momentum. I would definitely suggest binding another key for dodge, and you can do this by hitting escape, going over to controls, and then under controls you'll notice roll dodge here. I've actually bound it to Q because that works for me, but you can bind it to something else, whatever works for you. However, there is one additional step to take here, because what you'll find is you'll sometimes accidentally dodge by double clicking. You might be in a fight and end up double tapping a key for whatever reason, and then you dodge when you don't intend to dodge. The big problem with this is that you end up losing stamina, and you also might end up in a damaging spell or other harmful effect. So what you need to do to avoid this is go to settings again, and then you need to this time go to gameplay, and you need to get double tap dodge and disable it. A term you might have heard when reading or watching videos about ESO combat is animation cancelling. Now, if you haven't experienced this before in other games, you are probably thinking, what the hell is animation cancelling? Well, in the most simple terms, every attack has an animation. This is the animation of a light attack, for example. Now, I can actually cancel that animation by casting a different spell before the animation has completed. It might not have looked like it, but that light attack actually went through before my dragon skin armor activated. The benefit of doing this is simply that you're able to cast more abilities in a shorter space of time. There are actually a number of different ways to cancel animations in ESO, but we're not going to go into them here. I just wanted to make you aware of what animation cancelling is so you can go and do some further research. I'll be putting out far more in-depth guides in the future, but I don't want to lose the purpose of this video. Next up, let's talk about skills and abilities. Basically, in ESO, you get a number of skill points from doing different things. Primarily, you get them from leveling up, but you also get them from completing quests and also collecting things called sky shards that can be found around the map. These skill points can be spent to unlock abilities. You have a number of different types of abilities in ESO. You have your class abilities that are split into 3 different sections. In my case, I'm a Dragon Knight, so I have Ardent Flame abilities, Draconic Power abilities, and Earth and Heart abilities. Because this character has a few levels on it already, you'll notice that some of my abilities have already been unlocked. However, when a new ability becomes available, you'll see the plus sign here and you'll be able to spend a skill point to unlock it. Anything behind a padlock means that you haven't reached the rank to be able to use it yet. Now, there's something very important to realize here. When I say rank, I do not mean the level of your character. In ESO, you actually gain ranks for these different skill lines. So for example, you'll notice I'm rank 15 in Earth and Heart. However, I'm rank 18 in Draconic Power and rank 17 in Ardent Flame. The way that you gain rank in these different skill lines is to have them equipped to your bar. So it's really important to make sure that you have at least one ability from each skill line that you plan to use equipped to your bar at any given time. You'll notice the same for weapon skills, so if you want to level a one-hand weapon and shield, then you need to make sure that you have one of these skills at least equipped to your bar to make sure that the XP you gain is contributing towards leveling these skill lines. Builds can be quite involved and a little overwhelming for new players in ESO as well, so I would recommend just using the skills advisor over here to tell you which skills to pick. It can be a little confusing at first, but it's actually a very in-depth system and you get a lot of flexibility from it, so just take your time with it and enjoy it rather than getting all stressed out and trying to learn it all at once. Just to build on our previous point, there is one more thing that's worth knowing about skills, and it's worth knowing this early on. We talked about this little plus sign meaning that you've basically got a new ability to learn, but you also have these 3 little diamonds. This symbol signifies that this ability is ready to be morphed. If I click this symbol, it will present me with 2 options. So I can basically take my Stone Fist ability and morph it into Obsidian Shard or into Stone Giant. This basically takes the initial ability and enhances it in some way. The cool thing is you get to choose the enhancement that really suits your playstyle best. Again, this is going to be the kind of thing that in-depth guides are useful for, but I just wanted you to know what that little symbol meant and how morphing abilities worked. Now, while we're here, it's also worth mentioning attributes. You'll notice that you have 3 major stats here: Magicka, Health, and Stamina. Now you can see from the tooltip here that Magicka determines how many Magicka abilities you can cast and how effective those abilities are going to be. Health increases the amount of damage you can take in combat and how much healing you can receive. And then finally, much like Magicka, stamina determines how many stamina based abilities you can use and how effective those abilities will be. As you saw earlier in the video, things like dodging, sprinting and blocking with your shield actually consume stamina, not just stamina based combat abilities. At an absolute basic level, you need to be thinking about what kind of abilities you're going to use. If you're going to be using Magicka based abilities, then you're going to want to put attribute points into Magicka. If you're going to be using stamina based abilities, then obviously you're going to want to put them into stamina. Obviously you can also put abilities into health if you need a bit more survivability, but I've been finding that leveling at the moment isn't difficult enough to really warrant that right now. If you end up getting a load of Magicka based skills and then putting all of your attributes into stamina, then that's going to be a real problem for you because you're just going to end up running out of Magicka all the time and just being stuck, being unable to do anything but light and heavy attacks. Now this one might sound a little weird if you haven't played an Elder Scrolls game before, and that's kind of why I put it in the video, but you should always click on books and bookshelves. There are two reasons to do this. Number one, if you go and click on a bookshelf, then you're going to get some kind of lore. If you're interested in lore and story, then you might want to read some of this stuff. Secondly, sometimes when you click on a bookshelf, you'll get a skill point. In that case, I just got an increase to my two-handed skill. Another thing about ESO that's quite unique, at least in the MMO world, is that every class can equip every type of armor. And there's actually a reason for equipping different types of armor. You're actually advised to make sure that you have at least one piece of every armor type equipped. The reason for this is that if you go over to the skills tab, you'll notice that armor actually levels up in the same way that your other abilities do. Just as with your class and weapon abilities, your armor abilities will become unlockable when you hit certain ranks. This is going to be really important for your build, especially when you hit endgame, so it's definitely worth making sure that you've got one of each armor type equipped so you can unlock all of these different abilities. Exactly the same thing goes for weapons. Obviously you can't necessarily have every weapon type equipped, but as you use different weapons you will unlock new abilities for that weapon. And again, every class can use every weapon type. Being able to equip all these different weapon and armor types is one of the things that makes ESO classes feel a little homogenized, but at the same time it's one of the things that gives them incredible depth. Even though you have this flexibility and you're able to utilize so many different items, obviously at some point you're just going to end up with a lot of stuff in your inventory that you're not using. One of the most important things to do is to pay attention to these little symbols. The little bag of gold symbol that you can see here means that an item has the ornate trait, which means that it can be sold at an increased value. And generally speaking, if you're not using that particular item, it's probably worth just selling it to the vendor. That's not always going to be the case, but I'm kind of speaking in generalizations here, just to make it a bit easier for you to get started. Then you have the little magnifying glass, which basically means that this item is going to allow you to research something, and we'll get to that in the next point. The final symbol to be aware of is this one, which gives you increased inspiration when you deconstruct this piece of gear. Deconstructing is something you can do at an appropriate crafting station. What it's going to allow you to do is basically break apart this particular item, essentially destroying it to gain some materials from it. The items that carry this symbol basically give you increased inspiration when deconstructing, which means you're going to be able to level your professions a bit faster. Another thing worth knowing about crafting is basically if you want to do it, you need to find your way to crafting stations. So when you get to a crafting station, you have the option to refine materials, create new materials, deconstruct items like we talked about earlier. You can also improve materials, and then you also have research, which we talked about earlier. That's where you take an item that has a particular trait and you destroy it in order to learn that trait. When it comes to ESO, you don't actually have to pick your professions. Basically, they're all unlocked to you straight away. So I just use the woodworking station, and if I wanted to come over here and use, say, the alchemy station or go and use a blacksmithing station, then I can do that. I don't have to unlock them, and I'm not limited to a certain number of professions. Obviously, to make anything, you're going to need to have the materials, and you've already seen that we can get materials from deconstructing items, but they can also be found as nodes in the open world. This is a really quick one, but one thing I would urge you not to do in this game is miss out on the side quests. Obviously, in many MMOs, side quests are basically just ways to gain additional XP and fill the gaps when leveling. However, ESO has side quests that are better than the main storyline in many MMOs. You could just be wandering around in the open world and end up picking up a side quest that takes you on an adventure for the next 2 or 3 hours or even more, and it's full of spoken dialogue, it's full of great storytelling, so you don't want to miss that. Once you hit level 10, you're going to unlock the Dungeon Finder, and there's a couple of things I want to tell you about it. First of all, you can hit P to access the Group and Activity Finder, and then you can find the Dungeon Finder tab within that. Once you open that tab, you can queue for a dungeon, and you can basically queue for a random dungeon if you want, and what that will do is once each day, you'll get these rewards as well as whatever you find in the dungeon. Or if you'd rather, you can queue for a specific dungeon. I sometimes do this because I get bored doing the same dungeon over and over again, and I want to try different ones. This is all pretty simple, but the thing you need to remember to do is pick the right role. Right now I have the tank role selected, and if I wanted I could also apply as a damage dealer or a healer. This is really important for a couple of reasons. Number one, obviously you definitely don't want to be tanking or healing a dungeon if you don't know how to tank or heal. The second reason to get this right is that if you're in a group and you're trying to join with a group of friends, if you don't have all of these roles selected, it just won't put you in the queue. Next, I want to say just a few things about guilds, and number one is that it's definitely worth being part of a guild. Obviously this is the case in any game because it's just great to have that community of people to play with and learn from and just experience the game together. By the way, we just started a brand new guild on EU servers, so you're very welcome to come and join us there if you haven't got a guild yourself. If you are on EU servers and you want to get involved in that, just join our Discord server, which you can find in the description down below. So yeah, number one, obviously it's good to have people to experience the game with, but number two, you actually get benefits from being in a guild in this game. If you look up here, you notice that we've unlocked a few things. Number one, the guild bank, which is going to allow us to share different materials, different recipes, different resources that might be useful to other people in the guild. Then you have heraldry, which you can check out over here, and that's just an aesthetic thing, but it's kind of cool. And then once you reach 50 members, you can unlock the guild store. Now, I'm not really going to go into that, but there is quite an in-depth sort of economic system behind this game that you can do a bit of research on. And basically, guilds are a key part in that economy, so hopefully we'll unlock that fairly soon. On top of this, you can use player-owned housing as a guild hall, and you can also participate in alliance wars to own different territories, as well as hire guild traders. And finally, probably the biggest tip I can give you with this game is not to rush it. Don't try and rush to endgame. So many MMOs have such a bland leveling experience these days that we've kind of been conditioned to just think automatically that the game really starts at endgame. This couldn't be further from the truth with ESO. There is a huge amount of fun in the journey. Obviously there's plenty to do at endgame too, and I'm really looking forward to getting there and fully experiencing it for the first time rather than just doing it casually, but I'm in no rush whatsoever, and I'd encourage you not to rush either. Anyway, that brings us to the end of the video. Like I said, I'm going to be covering a lot more ESO from now on, so if you enjoy that kind of content, then I hope you'll consider subscribing to my channel. I'm also going to be streaming my journey over on Twitch. Probably the best place to keep on top of all my content, guild activity, and just meet other cool people who are into MMOs is our Discord channel. I'll put a link to that as well as my Twitch channel in the description down below. Hopefully you'll get a chance to chat to you there soon. Either way, take care of yourself, and I look forward to seeing you in the next video.